Oh, this must be some big-ass merger you're contemplating.
Who have you been talking to?
Oh, I'm just connecting the dots.
Oh, you're an amazing con artist, so you're a very smart young man.
I mean, come on, the two of you together? The whole world have to come begging for energy. The whole world have to come begging for energy. The whole world have to come begging for energy like Oliver Twist in his bowl of gruel.
Hey guys, Sean Pruitt, president of Kingdom Exploration. I'm going to talk about some things that are happening in the latest news. Now, I've been reading a lot of news, and quite honestly, I can't even keep up. There's so many things happening right now in the oil and gas industry. Now, today we had a federal rate hike, which caused oil prices to go up. Right now, WTI crude is around $70-something a barrel. So we've recovered since the banking crisis. Now, the whole thing behind the banking crisis, it was a woke bank, and it was Silicon Valley Bank. Now, typically, like your Wells Fargo, your Chase Manhattan, your Bank of America, those banks, 80 to 90% of the clients have less than 250,000 because the FDIC only covers, in the event that the bank goes under, the feds will back up $250,000 or less. Okay, and so the reason why everybody was freaking out, because if Chase went under, it wouldn't be a big deal. 90% of the clients would be made whole, no problem. Okay. But a bank like Silicon Valley, most of the clients had more than 250,000. Some of these guys are 50 million, 100 million, in the billions. These famous people were saying how much money they lost. We saw these long lines. They were all trying to get their money. And of course, social media went viral with this, and everyone started freaking out, and they started pulling their money from smaller banks, started transferring it to larger banks, the banks that can't, too big to fail type deal. Anyways, it was overly, the story just reached the world, and everyone started freaking out. Well, the Feds said, hey, we're gonna buy these, we're gonna bail them out. Okay, so that whole story is all said. It's all done. Oil prices recovered because of that. Okay, now today we have a federal rate hike, a quarter basis point, smaller than expected. And that caused oil prices to go up because, listen, oil is a commodity. You got to trade dollars for oil. If you live in Canada, you're paying a higher price than you live in America, even though it's a global crude. It's based and denominated in U.S. currency, okay? And so here's the big news that you need to be paying attention to. China and Russia signed contracts. They are in bed together, and Putin himself has agreed to settle his trade, 75% of his trade, if I remember correctly, in the yuan. Okay, this is so big. This is big league. Okay, here's the deal. We have Russia, we have Saudi Arabia, we have Iran, we have about 60% of the world's population that is in bed with China to come together to bypass the world reserve currency, which is the US dollar. Now, here's the deal. These countries are tired of the US controlling their wealth. I mean, here's the deal. We send paper money, they send us goods that took blood, sweat, and tears to produce, okay? All we have to do is print it. And so we're putting our debts on the backs of hardworking Chinese, Russians, people from Saudi Arabia, all over the world, while we become richer, okay? The lifestyle of the American dream, this is why everybody is risking their lives just to come into our country. That's why we're having a border crisis. That's why so many famous actors, they move to America. The smartest engineers, the smartest minds in the world, they go to America. We've siphoned off the smartest, most intelligent people in the world. They all come to America to live the American dream. And that's because we're the only country that could fire up the printing presses and not have a tremendous problem with inflation, even though it's a fiat currency backed by nothing, okay? Now, countries like China and Russia Iran, they're tired of being sanctioned. And the reason why they could be sanctioned is because in order to buy, sell, and trade, it has to be done using the U.S. system, the SWIFT system, and U.S. currency, okay? And so this new global alliance, this new world order, you want to call it BRICS, is going at a faster pace than anyone had ever dreamed, okay? This new relationship between China and Russia should be on the forefront of everyone's radar. And here's the deal. China has the highest demand of any country for oil. They are building facilities to burn oil, as where the woke Western alliances are going anti-fossil fuels. And I'm telling you right now, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Venezuela, UAE, Turkey, many of these countries make most of their money in fossil fuels. And many of these countries don't agree with the ideologies of the West. And they're tired of having their noose around their neck in the event that they step out of the bounds of what America considers good or bad. And I'm telling you right now, China is leading the charge on this. And so if you're paying attention, there's an initiative called the Belt and Road Initiative. Okay, in other words, it opens up global trade by building road through these other countries. Because the issue that China has, for instance, they don't have the ability to bypass the American Navy. Okay, in the event that China gets sanctioned and they can't export, they're done. And if they have the ability to bypass the waters that America controls, now they have the ability to buy, sell, and trade regardless of the sanctions that are put in place. So you give them the ability to travel and ship outside of the control of America, and you give them the ability to buy, sell, and trade outside of the control of the USD. Now you have a force to be reckoned with, okay? But I'm telling you, the list of countries that is getting involved with this, there's too many to read off here, but 60% of the world's population is in agreement and on board with this. And these people don't want the Western wokeness. They don't agree with a lot of it, but the only reason why they go along with it is because of the USD. But China and Russia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, they have come into an agreement to start using and intertrading their own currencies to bypass the US dollar. And here's the deal. Saudi Arabia had no choice. Saudi Arabia has been snubbed by the current administration. And some are saying, Saudi Arabia is falling into the hands of China to wake up America. Because Saudi Arabia still would, they would want to sign the Abraham Accord in order for protection and security. They would prefer protection and security from the U.S. versus China versus Russia versus having an agreement with Iran. Because here's the deal. China is trying to be the middleman to negotiate between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And right now there's a ceasefire and there's more peace talks than we've ever seen in a long time, okay? But I'm telling you right now, Iran has an opportunity to become more rich than they've ever been before. They're just a hired gun. They just want money. And they act out because they're being sanctioned by the U.S. But if they don't rely on U.S. dollar and the American system, then they can't be sanctioned anymore. Then why would they threaten the U.S. and threaten U.S. allies if they aren't relying upon the U.S. system anymore? So they have more willingness to be peaceful with the neighboring countries, especially if China is opening up the doors to buy and sell and trade with Iran, Saudi Arabia, with Russia, with UAE, and all these other countries, okay? But listen, 50, I think it's 50%. You know, it's hard to tell because you got so many countries involved. Because OPEC Plus controls 30 million barrels a day plus of production, and then add all the other countries. If this, they're going to control half the world's oil supply. China, if you can't control the world with the U.S. dollar anymore, you just can't. Okay, but what does control the world is energy. Oil is the most demanded product in the world, other than water and Starbucks. That was a joke, by the way. But oil. Without oil, you can't fight wars. Without oil, you can't build an economy. You can't build a country. China wants to grow. They want to multiply. And they're in Russia and Saudi Arabia, Russia and China, they're having these backroom meetings. Who knows what they're discussing? And here's what you have to understand. In I believe it's in 1944, the key to the success of the Bretton Woods, which is exactly why the U.S. dollar is one of the most powerful currencies, is the most powerful currency in the world, was simply because countries were going to war and they needed the American backing of the greenbacks, and they needed weapons to fight. And so America was selling these weapons. America became a superpower simply because we have the ability to print money and sell weapons, and we built the most powerful elite force in the world. Well, China and Russia and Saudi Arabia, if they have their own system, it would give them the ability to do this, and they have the oil to back this whole thing. Because if they control half of the world's oil supply, then they could cut the West off from oil and say, listen, if you want our energy, because that would break the backs of every country that they cut off. They would cause an oil embargo. Shell can't save us. The U.S. oil, we have roughly 44 billion barrels of oil as far as reserves. That's a calculated amount of oil we have in the U.S., okay? That could only last us about 10 years. We have about 10 years worth of energy left, and we're not making any major discoveries, and that's if we have the ability to extract that oil. I mean, a lot of this oil is trapped in tier 2 and tier 3 formations. It's difficult enough to raise the capital. I mean, you look at what Larry Fink and BlackRock is doing. They're woke. They are making it very difficult to fund oil and gas deals. The current administration. I mean, we're dealing with being slow played in New York. I mean, and getting permits to drill and having the ability to develop in areas that we shouldn't have any issues. The agenda is anti-oil. If you are anti-oil, Saudi Arabia, Russia, UAE, all these countries are like, what are you doing? You're destroying our most important part of our GDP. And China's playing ball with these guys. China's building more refineries. China is not woke. China has the high, their demand for oil is higher than any other country. These Eastern countries are growing. We have per capita, we use more oil than most countries per capita. Per capita, I believe we use about 3 or 4 times more oil than China. Okay, that's because Americans we drive more, we travel more per capita, and so but these people in China, if he just flips the switch, man, their demand will double. In order for China to become a superpower, in order for him to build this Belt and Road Initiative, it would open up his economy like no other country has ever. The growth would be fast and furious, faster than any, because they're a 5,000-year-old country. Their only goal is to become a superpower and grow. The only way to do that is with the backing of Russia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, all these countries, because he needs oil. And so here's what's happening. I mean, China and Russia, China needs Russian oil, and Russia needs Chinese cash, and it needs weapons. It needs a source of weapons. It needs the support of China. And so now China probably is buying all of Russia's oil. I mean, a good portion of it, because in order for China to do what they want to do, they need a tremendous amount of oil. And so you could cut off Russia from the US dollar, but you cut them off from oil, they'd have to close their doors. If you shut down their oil supply, they would not be able to do what they're doing. China is doing whatever they can to open up the door to trade with these other countries. And he's making deals with these other countries to make them richer than they've ever been before with this Belt and Road Initiative. And they're all signing up. Look it up. Do some research on the Belt and Road Initiative. I'm telling you right now, I've never been more concerned about the USD than I have been now. And if you, who was the gentleman? If you look up Robert Kiyosaki, he has an interview with Andy Schectum, I believe, and it's a video called New Global Reserve Currency Special Episode by Robert Kiyosaki. Look that up. It will give you a lot of insight as to what to expect. Okay, and this is something, if you watch my previous videos, I've actually talked about BRICS. I talked about this, but it was a little too early to really understand what was happening. And it was one of those things where, well, it may or may not even happen. Well, it's happening, guys. And so what does that mean for crude? Okay, well, crude is a global commodity. It is a commodity traded in US dollars. Everybody, and if you look up oil prices, it's going to be pegged to the US dollar because most oil is bought, sold in USD. Okay, is where Canada, they see oil prices based in US dollar, and then they do a conversion. So Canada is actually paying more for a barrel of oil than America is because the source of the currency comes from America. So if you were born and raised in America, you do not understand the difficulty of living in other countries and buying oil or buying commodities like gold and silver and oil. And so here's the thing. The more devaluation of the US dollar, the higher oil prices are going to go because you have to trade more dollars in order to buy crude, okay? So right now, oil prices are very low in comparison to the fundamental aspect of it. If you look at supply versus demand, oil should be much higher, but it's not because there is not enough people buying the commodity rally. The wokeness, I mean, those banks that failed is because of the wokeness of it. You got all of these major hedge funds that are being controlled by the woke agenda. And then you got these red-blooded hedge funds that are pro-oil and they understand what is happening, but they're sitting on their hands when it comes to fossil fuels simply because the question in their mind is, well, how is this current administration going to affect the oil and gas industry? Yes, it's very profitable, but what happens if I invest into it? There's a lot of questions, unanswered questions, okay? I'm here to tell you, the oil prices, we're going to see oil prices hit levels that this world has never seen, okay? Right now, there's a lot of concern about what's happening in the economy. A lot of people think we're going to go through a recession, okay? But here's the deal. The Eastern countries' demand is growing. I don't expect America demand to grow by that much, but the Eastern, we got to look at the Eastern demand. The Eastern economies aren't near as affected as America is going to be in the event that we do have a recession. There's, I believe, the Duran is one of the CEOs at a major hedge fund is saying by the year end we're going to see $140 oil. Okay, as where Goldman Sachs is saying, we're going to be around 90. Okay, and so there's a lot of concern. I mean, if we're just looking at simple fundamentals, we would see $140 oil. I'd be very confident in that. But considering that we dropped down to 60 something dollars a barrel, I was shocked to see that. Okay. A lot of that excess oil that's going into the strategic reserves, it's being depleted. Okay. And so shale oil, we can't rely on it. We're seeing a reduction in shale oil output. It's several months in the rear. It's going to take us time to see the result of underinvested shale, under development, and also the fact that they're developing in tier 2 and tier 3 assets. I think they're going to underperform than what they are saying. Okay. Some shell companies are sounding alarm bells, but most are simply saying, hey, things are looking good and we're going to continue to expand. We're following the rules of the new administration and we're trying to go, transition from fossil fuels to green, but they're just giving a lip service. At the end of the day, they're undercapitalized. They don't have the assets, the primary, the tier 1 assets that they're used to developing. And so they are hesitant to really develop in the tier 2, tier 3 assets because it's not profitable. I mean, you look at these prices, it's just not economically feasible for a shell company to go after tier 2 assets at these prices. And they don't know which direction to go because they're spending this money to go green. They're not spending enough money on fossil fuels. And so down the road, it's going to be very evident that shale did not fulfill its obligations and shale did not come to the rescue. And so if you look at the most recent OPEC plus meeting, they agreed to leave things where they are, continue the 2 million barrel a day reduction. Now, if there was a concern, if they thought oil demand is going to drop, if they thought oil prices were going to crash or drop, then they would have taken action and they would have reduced output. No problem. Okay. And so OPEC Plus has more wisdom and more knowledge about the oil and gas industry, whether the fundamental side of things, what is going on in the head of Xi Jinping. Russia, OPEC Plus, Russia is part of OPEC. Russia is probably, here's the deal. Saudi Arabia, Russia, and China are in bed together. They're interchanged. If you don't think that this OPEC decision not to reduce output had anything to do with what Putin is saying or China is saying, you think again, okay? And the fact that they have decided not to change anything, that speaks louder than you can imagine. I truly believe that China, part of the agreement is to keep oil prices low for the time being so he could buy as much oil as he can, okay? And it's interesting, strategically, China is so brilliant, so smart. China unloaded a bunch of oil onto the markets just before this Putin meeting, okay? And so China is brokering one of the largest oil deals this world has ever seen, the world's biggest trade deals this world has ever seen. In America, they're sitting on the sidelines on this one, okay? And just recently, America is sanctioning anyone involved in the production of Iranian drones. And so this is another example of why Iran, China, Russia, all these countries want to get off this U.S. currency, the SWIFT system, okay? And so I'm telling you, I could foresee these groups coming together and cutting the West off from oil and forcing us to get onto their system. Because if we don't, it will bankrupt America. And the only in oil prices here locally are going to hit levels we've never seen before. They could be $200 a barrel. I don't know. Okay, in that event, and exporting the oil would be the greatest way to really prosper, because that's the beauty of oil, is that we could export it. I don't know where gold prices are going. And quite honestly, I don't trust gold at all, because America could simply just take it away from you, no different than your gun. Okay. And in the event that BRICS comes together and cuts off America, they have no choice but to take the gold to save the US dollar. and they have the authority and the power to do that. All right. So, all right, guys, I'm Sean Pruitt, president of Kingdom Exploration. If you like this channel, please subscribe. If you're interested in learning more about what I do, look in the description below. Thanks.